That would have been easy about 5 years ago.
Yeah, maybe even like 10.
With the interest rate
Yeah.
being so low? Yeah.
Not with it being that high.
Nope. Not with
That's what
where
I'm
it's
saying,
at
is in
now.
reality, we're not.
It's gonna be hard to do now, but it should self-correct a little bit, and the housing won't stay quite as
Hope
high.
it self-corrects. It needs to.
Oh, I think it will, a little bit.
Not
You ready?
Not that dramatic.
All right, I'd like to welcome everyone out to a regularly planned planning commission meeting. We'll go on to item 2.1, which is the Pledge of Allegiance, and that'll be offered by Alex Dahlstrom. If you want to just come up to the mic.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Alex. We do have a quorum today. Is Heather online by chance? No, okay. Does anyone on the Planning Commission have any conflicts of interest with any of the items? Seeing none, we'll proceed to item 2.4, which is an approval of the February 3rd and February 17th Planning Commission meeting minutes. Look for a motion.
I move to approve item 2.4 was the comments for the meeting minutes.
A second.
Okay, motion made by Adam, a second by Forrest. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. We'll move on to the administrative items. Item 3.1, which is request consideration of a special exemption in regard to the height and setback requirements for accessory structure. And we'll look at city staff for more information.
All right, good evening. So, as you said, this is a request for a special exception for an accessory structure. There we go. All right. This property is located in the central area of the city here. It is in the Overlook subdivision. The property here, it's in an R1 zone. The lot shape itself is a unique shape. It's considered a pie shape by ordinance. Little background information. Like I said, the property is in Lookout Ridge. It's R15. The lot size is 0.49 acres. The applicant's requesting a 27 by 45 foot detached structure. It's 1,215 square feet, and he's asking for a special exception for rear and side yard setbacks and for height. Notices for this request were mailed on the 11th of April. So to qualify for special exceptions, there's a few criteria that the applicant has to meet. One is a regular lot shape, and per ordinance, his lot is considered a pie shape. Due to this shape, the applicant is asking for reduced setbacks because in a normal shaped lot, he could place that building further back and meet the required setbacks. Due to the unique shape of his lot, he's kind of limited to where he can place that structure. Another request he's asking for is a request, an exception to the height. Per ordinance, he's allowed to go to 25 feet. That's if he meets setbacks, and that's based on setbacks. For him to meet that 25-foot setback, to meet that 25-foot height, his building had to be set back 12 feet from each property line. Due to the irregular shape of the lot, he can't accommodate the size of structure he wants. If he moves it forward, it pushes it into the house. If he moves it left, it pushes it closer to the neighbors. That request for the additional height is based for architectural reasons. He's not looking to add any more space. He just wants to match the existing pitch on his home. As I mentioned, it is in a regular lot shape. He's asking for a 3-foot setback on the rear, 8-foot setback on the side, on the south side there. For the height exception, the majority of the building itself, the front, I guess, the right and the rear, and the front and the right, and the majority of the left side, it will be at 25 feet. The additional height's coming from, well, the additional height over the 25 feet is coming from the topography of the lot. So in the back corner here, you can see the grade of the lot slopes down. So he's asking for this additional 3 feet over the additional, well, over the 25-foot maximum height he can go. Just here I've kind of outlined his building heights based on the exceptions. So if he was to get no exceptions, his maximum height would be 16 feet. You can kind of see where that line is drawn. That would be the maximum height of this structure. With no setback exceptions, he'd be at 25 feet, and that would limit him an additional probably 3 feet off the top of that structure. And then with both exceptions, that average grade height is 28'10" overall on that exposed side. And these exposed sides will be towards the open space to the rear and the interior of the lot. It'd be closer to 30 feet on those sides. But the sides to the south of the adjacent properties would be 25 feet, and to the frontage would be 25 feet as well. Again, as part of the requirements is the applicant has to demonstrate that the hardship due to the lot shape. Any potential impacts on neighboring properties, these can be concerns of heights, and et cetera, or water runoff from the buildings, and how close they are to the adjacent lines. Looking over these, we feel that the applicant has met, our findings have concluded that we are meeting those requirements. For height and size, that's just based off an architectural request, and that's what he's asking for. We feel it's justifiable due to that he's not adding additional height to the building to add space. It's just to match the pitch of his house. Before I get into the recommendations here, as was discussed earlier in the work morning, there was an issue brought up regarding an encroachment that's associated with this property. During my discussions with the applicant, my understanding was the rock wall that was it's on the west side of the property there was existing and never been modified. His encroachment only consisted of the landscaping. Upon a site visit today, we did find that there was some modifications to that retaining wall. And speaking with the building department, we found out there was a compliance order placed on that property, a stop work order, in result of him extending the height of that wall and bringing in fill. So what the staff does recommend is, in addition to our recommendations, is that 2 other recommendations are considered, and those were presented to you earlier today in the work meeting. One consists of no building permit should be permitted until the applicant has remediated the encroachment, and then he provides an engineered drainage plan of the site for the areas of the building location and any areas that were affected by that encroachment.
On his property?
On his property, yes.
Does that still allow for the 3-foot setback to actually build a retaining wall in that 3-foot setback?
So he's not proposing he's building a retaining wall at his property line at this time. So the way it's drawn up is the rear of the house, he'll have the extended sim walls to make up that difference, and it will just be at a natural grade at that point. So if my understanding, he is not building any retaining walls, additional retaining walls on his property.
Yeah.
Let's see if you have any questions for me. I believe the applicant is actually joining us virtually.
Okay.
It's Brian Daniels, so.
Any questions for staff? All right, seeing none, then we'll ask the applicant, which I guess is online, if he has any additional discussion items or information on this.
Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Fantastic. On my side, it's froze, so I apologize. I can't, it's frozen. So in regards to the structure, I don't know if I could help answer some questions that you guys may have, but overall, Sheldon did a good job explaining kind of what's going on here. I have circumstances with the topography of the lot that's causing also height. The whole structure would only be about 22 feet tall if I didn't have the topography of the lot that sloped from front to back. That's also causing the overall height, how it's measured from the lowest point to the tallest point in his diagram. That's also one of the other reasons why this is. If the lot was flat, I would not be exceeding the height at all. But it is not. In regards to the structure in the back, the wall, it was all of the, I'm the second owner of the property, and all of the stones were already there. I just had them redone so that I could help redirect the trail traffic to quit using my driveway to access the trail was the whole point of that. It wasn't to gain any additional property at all.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for the applicant? No questions from city staff. Thank you. And then we'll turn time over to Planning Commission just for further discussion on this item.
Did I hear him correctly that his lot slopes from the cul-de-sac down to the back? And the hillside comes down, so that back line is a valley?
Correct. Correct.
It's not narrow.
It's not a valley?
It's a gentle valley.
It's not like
It
a
does what
valley.
you're describing. It becomes a valley,
for
a
drainage.
channel, exactly, but it is more extended.
Well, I mean, just in the drawings themselves of the elevations, it drops almost 10 feet just in the building length. That's a significant drop.
Over more than 30 feet of width, though.
Okay, thank you. We'll probably mute you right now just while we discuss this, but we may ask some questions in a minute, okay?
Okay, so because of that, what I'm thinking, if he puts a wall up, you're gonna have drainage issues on both sides of the wall, from his own lot coming down to the fence or the wall, and from the hillside, the city's hillside coming down to the wall. So to me, it seems like it's a bigger issue than just the garage and putting up a wall that follows his boundary line.
I kind of agree with you. I think in this case, in order to choose if we're going to go past to deviate from the standard, we probably need to actually see what the engineering of that wall looks like and can it be built and what's the remediation of that.
Is that similar to what staff recommended on item number 7, though?
It is, but I actually think it may make me decide, in my opinion, change depending on what that wall looks like. I might not be comfortable with the 3 feet setback, honestly, depending on where the wall sits in relationship to that. But
So, and what I'm thinking is I don't want to artificially create another issue. And we may mitigate his lot, but that water's got to go somewhere. And if it follows the wall till it leaves his property to the north, it adversely affects that adjoiner. If it falls off to the south, it does the same thing to the southern adjoiner.
It all kind of slopes to the north. It goes into a ravine that goes all the way down into the park.
Okay. Chase, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate one of the items I brought up in your work meeting, and that was that staff have been directed to work on this encroachment and look at that wall, specifically the engineering of it, and try to remediate that to get it back to its natural state.
Yeah.
As we've talked about this, we anticipate that that will change the drainage, right? I'm not the engineer, I don't know what that looks like. But I think your order of operations here is correct to say, all right, if we allow this exception and put that structure there, and then go back and change the drainage behind that, you know, what are we potentially doing to not only this lot, but the adjacent lots, as well as the trail and the city property.
And that's why I'm actually uncomfortable approving it at this time until we know I'll be just honest, if the wall has to move all the way to the property line, it may make that drainage area through, if we allow for just the 3-foot setback, too close to actually build a safe drainage and become a bigger problem. So I lean on more of a continuation until we can address the wall and address all that solution and have it come back to evaluate, yes, it's safe, we can put the 3 feet and it's taken care of, or, you know what, really the wall actually has to be even bigger and extend out. I think it would be irresponsible of us right now to approve it without that information, now that we know a little bit more about the wall's issues.
I would think though, with the recommendation under 7 here, that I think we can delegate that to Sheldon.
Yeah.
He can take care of it.
That's how I was looking at it too, that could be, well, engineering go through it because, I mean, for all we know, they may have to have some different drainage options on site.
I'm just saying, our typical public utility easements, I thought were 5 to 10 feet, so, on the lot. So I would just say we're into that area, and I would say normally we could say, yeah, staff, go with it. But if we're approving 3 feet, we're basically limiting staff to only a 3-foot easement, is what I'm trying to say. So
At that pinch point on the corner.
at that pinch point on the corner, and if that drainage does need more, like I said, I don't know, because the wall technically, I believe, should probably be on his property plus the drainage itself. It may create that pinch point, like you said, a little too tight at this point to approve it without more information.
So you're saying if we had a topo map we could look at, then
If we had a topo map or had staff work with the applicant to come up with a drainage solution to ensure, like I said, if the drainage, I don't know what staff's working on with the wall, but the way this is structured is the retaining wall needs to be on the applicant's property.
Well, it sounded like at least the applicant said that the wall was actually built up to try to keep
It's a
individuals
deterrence.
from cutting through his property to the trail.
and I could see
which-
people doing that, parking in that cul-de-sac going right through, but
Which
the
is
gar-
completely different issue than the actual drainage.
but the garage is a much better stop than
Yeah, the
main
garage will
wall.
stop that.
Yeah.
so the wall won't matter now. The garage will stop people from going through his yard.
And all I'm trying to say is say they completely get rid of the wall, and you're saying the garage is now the diversion structure, but that drainage needs to be bigger because it is a pretty decent hillside that's coming down, we would be disabling engineering and basically saying it's only 3 feet. So to me, we need to see what the drainage has to do with the situation before we make an impartial action. Like I said, just my opinion.
I kind of agree with your opinion that I think that it's important that the building compliance order, that is remediated first. That way all the drainage can be worked out, on the city property. And then we can come back and kind of revisit the setback and the height. Because once that's all remediated, then city will know all the drainage effects and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But just to recommend, the city work it out and approve all these things before it's worked out, I think that you're putting a cart before the horse.
Especially with it being a special exception.
Yeah, right.
Now, if it would be a normal standard solution we were talking about, then I would say, okay, we can have
Right,
staff look at
right.
it. But we're actually making a special exception to our standards. And I think we just need to mitigate all of the other solutions so that that's all we're looking at. If the wall wasn't the issue and the drainage wasn't the issue, I would be more comfortable at this stage. But it sounds like there's a lot of unknowns with that.
Was that retaining wall, Sheldon, was that retaining wall actually built for any drainage reason, or was it more of keep the hikers off our property?
So my understanding was the previous owner and the adjacent homeowners worked with the city to install like a little retaining wall along that back perimeter and create kind of a wash basin for the water to come down.
Oh, it was
and
for
flow
the
down.
water.
Yeah. So my understanding is if he takes it back, I'm not sure, I'm not an engineer either, is if they bring it back to the native state, I'm assuming that the wall's not going to move forward more towards his property. It's kind of going to remain in that same area. But like I said, I don't know. That's a question for engineering and maybe we should wait. It's up to you, it's your decision at that point.
Okay, thank you, Sheldon.
Sheldon, I have one more concern or one more item to clarify. Typically, these platted lots within Harriman have they're surrounded by public utility easements, and they're usually much wider than 3 feet on the back.
Right,
So
yeah.
even with this approved, are we encroaching on someone else's, a utility company's vested rights?
So, and I didn't mention in my presentation, I think I did address that in the staff report. So it is a 5-foot utility easement on the rear side of his property, and he did receive waivers from the utilities. So he's still required to at least maintain, the drainage in that area. So, we don't think 3 feet's enough to accommodate the drainage coming down that mountain, then maybe the building should be shifted forward.
But engineering hasn't evaluated that, is
Right.
what I'm hearing.
Right.
Thank you.
Like I said, I think it's a viable option, but I think there's 2 unknowns for a special exception. So that's just where I lean on more of a continuation until we mitigate that. Like I said, maybe it's fine, I don't know. But the fact that it seems like there's a lot of potential concerns right here, to me, it seems like it wouldn't be wise for us to do an approval at this time. But that's just me. Like I said, I don't know how everybody else feels.
And at least for me, I'm looking at 6 and 7, and it feels like those do resolve that. Now, the question is because this is a special exception, do we need to make sure it comes back just because it's a special exception? Because I do think 6 and 7 sort of answer those. It's based off of all the other exceptions they're asking for. I think the question is, do we feel like it needs to come back because of the special exception? Because I do understand where Adam's coming from.
That's kind of what I'm leaning for. I would normally be okay with that, but we're kind of on a. This is one of, I think, our first special exceptions related to this type of setback, and I would hate to get into. We make so many conditions on every special exception that it basically voids the purpose of special exceptions and makes it customized to every individual situation, and that to me I think would be very difficult to mitigate.
Well, I think the special exception for the height, though, is a good one. I think that makes sense. So I don't have any trouble with that.
Yeah, based off slope, I feel comfortable with that as well.
Commissioner Burbert?
Yes.
If I may, there was a question asked of staff about what was the purpose for that original retaining wall, rock retaining wall in the city's open space. Sheldon's comment was based on information received from the residents. I don't believe that we had any city record of how the wall was built or when or anything like that. So he was just repeating what we've heard from the residents.
But we don't have any. We don't have any Parks Department type of documentation of that, right?
Not that we're aware of.
So that's why I just think it just needs a little more investigation, but totally makes sense. But because of that, I lean on continuation. So unless anybody wants to argue with me, I'll go ahead and make a motion.
I'll let Planning Commission make a motion.
All right. I would like to make a motion to continue item 3.1 to address the drainage potential and the wall. Coming up with a plan. Like I said, it doesn't need to be mitigated, but coming up with what that looks like so we can evaluate that
You
setback.
want a more fully engineered plan. Yeah.
Exactly.
Oftentimes, we just simply see arrows directing like where the water's going to flow. We need something more detailed with grades.
I think in this
and
case, for the
systems.
special exception with what's going on and the fact that the retaining wall's on city property and we're asking it to be moved, there may be a pinch point that setback needs to be a little bit bigger, so.
Or even if we need it.
Yep, or like I said, that could be a solution, I don't know. So that's my
Motion made by Adam,
I'll second it.
second by Daryl. We'll call for a vote. Daryl?
Yes.
Andrea?
Yes.
Adam?
Yes.
Jackson?
Nay.
Forrest?
Yes.
All right, so motion to continue with a vote of 4-1. We'll move on to item 3.2. That's a request for a conditional use permit for the Academy Terrace Apartments, comprised of 215 dwelling units, and we'll look at city staff.
All right. Yes, so this is an application for a multifamily development near Lee's Market. It's also part of the South Hills MDA, and that's kind of good to keep in mind as we go through their plans a little bit here. It's zoned RM. They recently went through a zone change here to allow for this type of complex and density. A little background, it's going to have about 215 units and ranging from studio apartments to 3-bedroom apartments. There are 5 residential levels above 2 levels of parking, so 7 levels total. There's also additional amenities that will be in the building, and I'll go over those a little bit later. So in this MDA, there is a modern mountain theme, and they have received approval, ARC approval for their elevations, and they include several design elements as required by their MDA, such as color changes, texture change, material change, as you could kind of see in the previous photo. Here's some different angles of the building and what the elevations they're proposing. So again, in their MDA, they're required to meet a 20-foot average setback, which they are. The height of the building would be about 80 feet on the north side and about 59 feet on the south side, so that averages out to about 70 feet. Again, that meets the height requirement for this area. With parking, we have our parking standards in city code, and they have provided enough parking to meet those requirements. There are, as I mentioned, there are the 2 levels of parking, and there also will be about 30 stalls outside of the building. If I remember correctly, they needed about, let's see if I can do the math. There are about 418 stalls in the structure, and then 30 outside. They needed about 50 or so guest parking. Their solution to that is to have some kind of call system as they enter the parking garage for guest spots. If you're interested in knowing more about that, you can ask the applicant how they would do that. But they do provide enough parking. Landscaping requirements, they will meet the water efficiency standards. With this MDA, this planning commission process was expedited a little bit. So there will be some recommendations from staff for approval. Landscaping will be one of them, just that they continue to work with Heidi, the landscape architect, to have all those landscaping standards met. As I mentioned before, there will be different amenities, pool, hot tub, spa. They also would like to have some amenities such as a pet grooming station that is only available to residents. Those type of commercial developments are not allowed in this zone, but it would be for the residents of this development. So here are the conditions. There's a couple of the departments had some conditions just for the applicant to work through after approval and before they submit for a building permit. Number 1 would be to install the sidewalk along the south side on Autumn Spring Drive. That's a condition of approval from their original approval of this subdivision, I believe. So we just would request that get put in because the development is being put in. To comply with all engineering standards, specifically this, including a connection for a proposed 8-inch culinary water line through the property. Building had a couple conditions as well, such as showing accessibility, the ADA parking requirements, and making sure that's up to that code as well. I've talked a little bit about the parking, just knowing how they would provide for that guest parking requirement. Building also had a correction about pathways from parking and to the public right-of-way or public sidewalk. There are a couple landscaping requirements. For every 10 required parking space, there are supposed to be 2 shrubs and a tree and a 5x5, at least, or 25 square foot landscaped buffer type thing. And I believe on their plans for the parking outside, there is one area where it is 11 spots. So just working with staff to make sure that that requirement is met as well. And as I mentioned previously, continuing to work with Heidi to comply with all the landscaping requirements. So staff does recommend approval with the conditions that I just mentioned. The applicant is here and has a presentation as well that he'd like to share with you, but I'm happy to answer any questions that you have for staff.
Great. Any questions for staff? All right, thank you. If the applicant's here, if they just want to come up and state their name.
Hi, Alex Dahlstrom with the Wasatch Group. Talia did a really good job of going through essentially kind of our vision here. Maybe just to give a refresher to those in the room about Academy Village as a whole, the 50 acres. We initially were thinking of kind of spreading out the residential and kind of laying it down in more of a garden-style apartment situation. But we did kind of pivot and go more towards this podium style on Pod 35, which opens up Pod 39 for more commercial use, which we think will benefit us in the city as well. And we really love the job that Architecture Belgique did on this project, and we're really excited about it, and we think it'll not only benefit the development of Academy Village, but Harriman as a city. That's really all we have. If there's any questions, we do have a member of the architecture team here, as well as a member of the property management team. So we're open to any questions that you may have.
All right, thank you. Any questions for the applicant or agent?
Just on that guest parking, will you go over that?
Yeah, we can go over that. Eric, did you want to kind of touch on parking?
My name is Eric Balls with Architecture Belgique. What we have done is set aside 24 stalls on the main level, the first row on the inside of the parking garage for visitor parking, along with the 30 stalls that are at the surface level. The idea is that we will work with management to provide a call system and reservation system that the tenants can use to reserve a stall for the guest that would then come to the complex, use some type of call box or application phone where they could then dial to the tenant. The tenant would then let them into the garage. They'd have one of those 24 spaces that would be reserved for them. Those spaces are at a point in the garage where they would have quick and easy access to the elevator lobbies that they can go directly up to the residence unit.
Do you worry about residents using that for themselves, or?
That would be, they're going to be specifically designed and labeled as visitor-only stalls, and then the management team would be enforcing towing for anyone that's not in that's not a visitor or that hasn't reserved that spot for a visitor.
All right, thank you. Any other questions?
Not for the applicant.
Awesome, thank you so
Maybe I'll
much.
have a quick one. Oh,
One more question, I guess.
on your balcony sizes, what is kind of the minimum depth on those?
Minimum depth, they're kind of an angled balcony. The smallest side of the angled balcony is 5 feet, and then those angled based off of the width anywhere between 7 and 8 feet on the opposite side of that. So they're relatively large balconies for an
Yeah,
apartment.
those are large.
Great, thank you. Additional discussion amongst the planning commission?
My question is just on the whole pivoting of the density, and so that we can add more commercial, which I get we need commercial, but is that in the master plan? I thought the whole density, you couldn't just shove it around we have this with schools all the time, right? You lose density when that happens, so it's more for the planning staff if you've looked at that.
So with the master development agreement and everything going on, and then pivoting to where it's commercial here, and then the density switching here, how is that working?
So we had a specific amendment that was approved by the city council that identified the number of units that were going to be spent in this RM zone, and they're complying with that requirement. Yeah, so that was already addressed in the MDA.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you.
Then I don't have anything.
Looking for a motion then if there's no other discussion on this item.
I'll go ahead and make a motion to approve item 3.2 with staff's 7 recommendations.
I'll second.
Motion made by Adam, second by Jackson. We'll call for a vote. Forrest?
Yes.
Jackson?
Yes.
Adam?
Yes.
Andrea?
Yes.
And Daryl?
Yes.
All right, thank you. And thank you so much. We'll move on to item 3.3. This is on for a public hearing as well. So before we start that, I'm just going to read the public comment and policy procedure. The purpose of public comment is to allow citizens to address items on the agenda. Citizens requesting to address the commission will be asked to complete a written comment form and present it to Wendy Thorpe, Deputy Recorder. In general, the chair will allow an individual 3 minutes to address the commission. A spokesperson recognized as representing a group in attendance may be allowed up to 5 minutes. Public hearing comments may be submitted by emailing recorder@harriman.org. All right, we'll move on to 3.3 then. Consideration to approve the preliminary plot for the reserve at Sky Ranch. And Sheldon.
You're going to see me a few more times tonight, so.
Lucky us.
Yeah, so this is a subdivision for Phase 3 of the reserves of Sky Ranch. It's located there off 134 and about 60th West. What the applicant is proposing is a 6-lot subdivision. As this map shows, it's showing this area zoned as A1. But just recently, and I think you guys have seen this amendment to the zoning map, where this area here specifically was rezoned to 8.25 to accommodate this subdivision here. The parcel size is 3.47 acres. The applicant is proposing a 6-lot subdivision. It doesn't work out. Okay, and these 6 lots. They do meet all the requirements for the Ag .25 zone. They have the appropriate frontage and lot sizes. The applicant is proposing lots from 1/3 of an acre up to almost a little over 3/4 of an acre. As proposed, the density is about it's like 1.78 units per acre, so they're about 1.8 units per acre is what they're proposing here. There is a zoning condition on this property of no more than 2 units per acre. They're not exceeding that. Again, this is an extension of the Sky Ranch. It's supposed to be Phase 3. There was a zoning map amendment done previously, and the zoning condition of 2 units per acre. As mentioned, what has been proposed does meet the lot width and size. The setbacks for the zone are recorded on the plat, which are consistent with the regulations under our city ordinances. And again, this will be a traditional subdivision, so they'll have to comply with single-family design standards. So going forward, staff does recommend approval of this subdivision. You guys have any questions for me?
Any questions?
Staff, I guess.
I do not.
All right, thank you, Sheldon.
And the applicant's here, if you have any questions for the applicant.
All right, if the applicant's here and wants to come up, share any additional information? And if you can just state your name.
Hello, my name is Jeff Neal with the Reserve of Sky Ranch. This is Phase 3 of 3 phases. We went with our similar large lot subdivision. The 2.5 acres on the north that border the properties to the north, and then on the east side are the 2 homeowners or the landowners we bought the property from, and then a vacant property to the west. But there are 2 of the 2.5 acres are actually they're bigger than halves. One's 0.79 or something like that. They'll be our 2 biggest lots out of all 3 phases. So plan is to build 6 more really nice custom homes. Appreciate your time. If you have any questions now or later, just let me know.
Thank you so much. Any questions for the applicant?
And I'm sorry for my voice. I'm not infected. I helped a friend of mine pull carpet out of their basement yesterday, so I've got a little hoarse throat from doing that.
That's okay. We heard you great. Thank you. This is on for a public hearing, so at this time I will open the public hearing if there's anyone that wants to make comments on this item. All right, then at this time we will close the public hearing and we'll turn to the Planning Commission for discussion or a motion to be made.
I can go ahead and make a motion to approve item 3.3 with staff's recommendations.
I'll second.
Motion made by Adam, second by Forrest. We'll call for the vote. Forrest?
Yes.
Jackson?
Yes.
Adam?
Yes.
Andrea?
Yes.
And Daryl?
Yes.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your time. We'll now move on to item 3.4, and that's a request for a conditional use review for gas station and convenience store located on Harriman Main Street.
All right, well, good evening. It's good to be with you tonight. So this is a conditional use request for the Come and Go Convenience Gas Station. Just to give a little bit of preface to this, this has been an item, so long ago, there was a B's gas station that was approved on this site. It was appealed, it was approved, appealed by up to 3rd District Court, I believe. In the end, it was, it won in court and then never got developed. So fast forward 3 years, or 3.5 years, and we got a new application for the Come and Go gas station. Just by way of information, the residents became aware of the application, and we met with the residents to the north of this development, and then individually as staff, and then we also facilitated a meeting with the applicant and the residents there to kind of hash out some meetings, or hash out some concerns of theirs. So even though this is not public hearing, the public has been involved. They've sent emails on to the city council and the mayor as well, so they're aware of this situation here. Of course, this is just up the street here, just kitty corner from the Holiday gas station. This is the site plan overlaid on the aerial, so you can kind of get an idea of what that site looks like in respect to how it, how it addresses the residents to the north, and then the commercial buildings to the east of that. And then this is just an aerial view, well, not an aerial view, but just a street view of the property where the gas station will be going. So these are the things in terms of standards that we look at is engineering, zoning, and then the Harriman Town Center design standards as well. For about a year, just over a year, we've been requiring or requesting commercial sites to go all the way through an engineering review before it gets to Planning Commission approval. So we don't have a list of 30 or 40 conditions that they still need to comply with to make sure all the connections work. So that process has been completed. Engineering is signed off on their site plan approval here. So we're just looking at, really tonight, the zoning and the Harriman design standards, Harriman Town Center. So again, this is their layout. You can see the landscaping proposal, the location of the building, dumpster, and the canopy. The building's just under 4,000 square feet. They've got 8 gas pumps under the canopy. They will be completing the masonry wall to the north of this, which will match up to the existing wall to the east of it. And then they're providing 18 parking stalls. This is the elevation of the building. It's 22.5 feet tall. The canopy itself is 21 feet tall, so just a little bit shorter. The finished materials are listed here, and going through the Harriman Town Center design standards, those materials do comply with those design criteria, as do the elevations and the architecture of the building. This is what the canopies will look like, or the canopy will look like. Again, there's 8 pumps underneath that canopy. So in terms of conditional use, this is the list of items we look at. I've kind of highlighted some of the ones that are more impactful than the others, and we'll maybe focus a little bit more on those items. So we'll be looking at compatibility with adjacent uses, impacts on adjacent uses, noxious and offensive emissions, and then touching a little bit on the impacts of health. And I'm just going to leave this graphic up to the right so you can kind of, as we go through the discussion, you can refer to that site plan. So as you can see, there's a residential development to the north of this. The building, the gas station building is 55 feet building to building, and then 37 feet from building to property line. The required setback for the building is 30 feet, and as you can tell, the building is kind of skewed. So at only one point would it be 37 feet, and then, you know, away from that point, you get farther away to increase that residential buffer to the north. The gas pumps are about 167 feet from the nearest residential building, and just for point of reference, I included these other existing gas stations and the distances from the pumps to the nearest residential building. So out of those three, this one is still furthest away. There's a couple of other gas stations in the city that are further away than the proposed come and go, but these three here are a little bit closer. And that's just for point of reference. As I mentioned, they will be completing the masonry wall to the north. They do have a lot more landscape material between the gas station building itself and the residences to the north to help, you know, mitigate the sounds and smells and sights and everything. The dumpster was located in the initial approval. It was located to the east of the building, and as per the resident's request, that has been moved away from the building and further away from the residential development there as well. And then they have provided a light plan which shows that there is, you know, zero light emissions at the point of property line, probably within a couple of feet of the property line. The light dwindles out. And we'll get into that a little bit more as well. So these are the mitigation measures that the applicant has made from the initial, their initial proposal. So they're against the masonry fence, they moved the dumpster. They will be installing a parapet on the building to shield any rooftop noise, and that will go all the way around the building. They've increased the setback, again, a larger building setback. The building is skewed, again, to help reduce the impact of that, the adjacency to the residential neighborhoods. They provided a lighting plan, as I mentioned, showing, you know, that the light emissions do not encroach into the neighbors' properties. And then they've increased the total amount of landscaping on the site. They're only required to do 15, and they have 36%. On top of those mitigation measures, well, I'll get into some of the mitigating factors that we thought were appropriate as well by staff. And one of the first ones is hours of operation. We're requesting or a condition to be approved to only allow the gas station to be open from 5 a.m. to midnight. So between the hours of midnight and 5 a.m. it would be closed. Come and go is typically, from all the other locations that I looked at, they're typically a 24-hour operation. In an email I received from the applicant, they were okay with this provision. And that's just to mitigate late night noise, late night gatherings that would cause noise that's not typical to the neighborhood itself. Some of the other recommendations by staff is concerned about lighting fixtures, especially as they emit to the property to the north. So we'll require those to be, during the building permit phase, we'll look at those, and once they're approved, they'll be non-replaceable, so we'll go out and inspect those and make sure that the lighting fixtures that were approved as part of the permit are actually the ones that get installed. There were some concerns in regards to the tree placement of tree branches encroaching over property lines, and there's some gardens and other features in the backyards of these folks, and they wanted to have a little more. Didn't want total light to disappear, right? They wanted to have the buffering, but our recommendation is to have the applicant work directly with those residents on the tree placements and see if they can come to an amicable solution. If not, then they can work with the city and we'll help to locate those trees and the other landscaping that they have in here as well. Another condition is making sure that the venting is directed away from the residential neighborhood, and that's for both the food and the tank. The Come and Go does have a small, similar to like what the Maverick has, kind of they don't prepare anything on site, but it's all, they warm it up and they have maybe small, like a small kitchenette kind of thing, but it may emit some smells that way. So we're just recommending that any food venting be directed away from the residential neighborhood. No signage on the rear of the building, and then any modification in terms of location of parking stalls or building location or gas pumps, any modification would need to be approved by the Planning Commission. That seems to be a question that we always get is, well, if I do these changes, can I not have to come back to Planning Commission? So we just wanted to make sure that that was clear. In terms of the impact on health, I have reached out to the Salt Lake County Department of Health and the Utah Department of Environmental Quality to try to understand this aspect a little bit more. Neither of them provided me with any kind of strict compliance order from the state in terms of distances from gas pumps to residential neighborhoods. As I've driven around, I've noticed several gas pumps that are much closer than the Come and Go is proposing. So, as a staff, I don't feel that we really have any standard to base a recommendation on health other than, what the applicants provided in terms of the additional buffer, additional landscaping to help mitigate those effects. In terms of zoning compliance, the initial, at the time of the staff report, they had only been providing 17 parking stalls. They have updated their site plan now to include 18 parking stalls, which is consistent with the ordinance. And then another condition is along Harriman Main Street, they've only provided 13.24 feet of buffer. And that's only for the first little portion, maybe the first 50 feet from that entrance to the west, and then it increases to 15 feet. So the applicant is requesting for a waiver of strict compliance. Waivers can be approved, as long as the intent of the landscaping is met, which they are still providing, a lot of landscaping, and as you go down that street, what they're providing is consistent with what's in place now. And the reasoning for that reduction is just to help maneuvering their gas trucks through the site. And as I mentioned, they wouldn't need it for the entire kind of what's southwest, that angled frontage. It would just be for maybe the first 50 feet or so that 13.24 buffer exists on. So these are the options for action here. We do feel comfortable as a staff with the recommendations that we've made, and if there's additional recommendations from the commission, we would be supportive of those as well. Our recommendation is for approval with the following conditions of approval that hopefully I went through sufficient enough. If there's any questions, I'll be glad to clarify and answer what I can.
Clint, I have one. When we approved this originally, I know it was a different brand, but they had like a sewer dump for RVs right out in the front. Is that still proposed or not? I just trying to understand.
I didn't see that in their plans.
I was trying to zoom in on that location and I couldn't tell. I was just more questioning. I know that was an issue at one time.
I didn't see that. No.
None.
Sound like it.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, applicant. All right, any questions for staff? All right, Clint, good job. Now, if the applicant's here, if you want to just state your name and any additional information. And it looks like you answered the last question, but if you want to just say it into the...
Yeah, I'm Christian Michelson with Galloway here, representing Come and Go tonight. Just want to thank you guys for considering this project and thank the Harriman City staff. They've been very thoughtful and thorough and good to collaborate with and work with, and really appreciate that. So I'm a resident here in Utah, and I wasn't really familiar with Come and Go before I started working with them. And they're a family-owned company, and they run a chain of over 400 stores just like these, and it's very professionally done and clean and well lit, and really, really nice stores. And so they've been doing this for over 60 years. There's just a lot of really great aspects about their corporate culture, and I mean, I could tell you more about them, but I'm also happy to field questions, and yeah, we're excited to bring this to Harriman, and this will be one of the first communities that we come into in Utah, and we're excited to, you know, join the Harriman community and give back to the community as well. So we do donate 10% of corporate profits to local charities, and do a food rescue program that diverts waste from landfills and also provides food for local food pantries and people in need. So yeah, the more I've come to know Come and Go and work with them, just very impressed by their professionalism and corporate culture. And we you know, as Clinton said, we've tried to work with the local community and hear some of their concerns and address some of those concerns as much as we could, mitigate those, and still, you know, bring something to the community that represents us, represents Come and Go well. And I know our client Ryan is on the meeting online tonight as well, and so he may have something he wants to add to that, but yeah, that's it for us. We're proud to present this project to you.
Thank you. Any questions?
I don't have any.
All right.
Well, I have one. I like the plan, the overall look. Just for clarification, the driveway on Harriman, Maine, there's a cross easement with the neighbor to the east?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. In place?
That's correct. It's being put in place as a part of the project, yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, I think you can take a seat.
Thanks.
Thank you. Now we'll discuss Planning Commission, discussion, comments, or look for a motion.
Let's see, just as a quick thought, I didn't realize this, but I'm actually working on a project now with Christian as a civil engineer. Or he's a civil engineer on one of my projects. He's with a different owner. So I don't see any conflict of interest, but I just wanted to make sure that was clear.
Thank you, Jackson.
I mean, to me, it fits all the criteria we've talked about. When it was the different gas station, I don't see anything wrong with it, so I'm ready to make a motion.
I did think of one question myself, maybe just back to city. How long has it been zoned MU2?
No, it's been years, though.
I believe it's been zoned that way since the original town center. It's technically part of town center.
Yeah, it's technically part of town center.
We dealt a lot with this when it was, I can't even remember the last gas station it was. And it was a big debate, and we were in the old city hall. So that's how long ago.
Oh, in the old city hall?
In the old city hall, so.
7-8 years ago,
It was,
somewhere around there.
it was around when we both first started, so.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
So it's always been a possibility for,
It has been.
It actually was approved. We approved it. I think I approved the last gas station, if I remember right. And like they said, there was litigation, and it took a long time, and then it never made it through. So I know that it was approved, but it just that gas station didn't come. So
Yeah.
So with that, I'm ready to make a motion to approve item 3.4 with staff's 10 recommendations.
Motion made by Adam.
I'll second.
We'll give it to Daryl first. Second by Daryl. We'll call for a vote. Daryl?
Yes?
Andrea?
Yes.
Adam?
Yes.
Jackson?
yes?
And Forrest?
Yes.
All right, thank you so much. We'll now move on to item 4.1, which is under our legislative items, which is going to be a recommendation to City Council. And this is to recommend to amend Chapter 10-3 to express acknowledge that trails are included in the definition of a public park. And this is on for a public hearing as well. City staff? This is Mike's item.
Sheldon, while we're waiting, can I ask you a question related to the last item? The two parcels that are open across from City Hall, are those MU2 as well?
They are.
Okay, thank you.
That was an easy question.
I apologize. That item, as you know, is a very sensitive item, and I wanted to make sure a particular issue was addressed with the neighbors. Thank you, and as you've introduced, this is a legislative item, which means that we will have a public hearing, and the request is for you to make a recommendation to the City Council, who will be making the final decision on this request. So this is a text amendment that was initiated under the direction of the City Council. The administration has been talking about the management of city resources and the planning of parks. Our current city manager is very concerned about our resources, our very limited resources in the city. And oftentimes when it comes to the planning and designing and developing of these parks, this is a very significant financial impact to the city. In addition to that, we believe, and I'll mention this again later in this report, we believe that the public engagement process is largely through the planning of our master plans, and when we're identifying places in the city where we want to develop parks and trails. And then subsequent, more finite or focused proposals would still have a public process that would be managed by the Parks Department and city staff. So with that said, the request is to amend the definition of a public park to very clearly recognize that a trail is an element of our park space. There's been some questions of that with residents in the city. So we just want to be more clear in the record that a park does include a trail. And then in the current city code, as you can see, where public parks are listed, it's conditional use in these specific zones. We're proposing to change that to a permitted use in all of those zones. You'll notice that we're not introducing public parks into commercial zones or manufacturing zones. Public parks are listed in the MU2 zone, which, as you mentioned, is like town center. I'm not sure why we don't have it in an MU zone. I was just simply, the request was to amend the conditional use to a permitted use in the zoning table. But if you wanted to include the MU zone, that's a possibility as an amendment. And then you'll notice that we're adding this footnote here, that a public park will be subject to an improved administrative city policy. And I included that draft city policy in your packet for consideration, which specifies that there is still a public process and public engagement process on planning for park space. Just for your reference, I included this map in your packets, and if you have any questions, we can come back to the zoning map. But we also conducted a kind of a high-level inventory of where open space and park property is currently located in the city, and we kind of broke this down into a very simple table. You can see what's improved, what kind of has a mixture of some improvement versus native, and then of course the native space primarily up in our foothills in the city. We applied, this map was picking out only Harriman city-owned property. We do have a number of privately maintained parks in the city. Again, we're talking specifically about public parks within the city. As I mentioned earlier, we believe that it's important to engage the public in planning for where parks are occurring in the city. That is often done when we do master plans for the city. Members of this planning commission are familiar with some of the park planning and trails planning that we have done recently in the past, and those of course have public hearings associated with them. And this is just one image of kind of the detailed, where we're identifying both existing and future locations of improvements within the city for park system. As typical, what is before you tonight is to hold a public hearing, consider the options. You can vote to recommend approval of the draft as it's proposed. You may modify that draft. You may continue it or table it if you wish to study this further, and if so, just give staff direction as to what additional information you would like us to research and bring back to you at a future meeting. Or you could vote to deny, you could give a negative recommendation to the city council on the recommendation. If you do make a motion either to approve or to deny, of course, that is a recommendation again to the city council for a final decision. Any questions for me before you open the public hearing?
I do have one question. So for instance, we have Midas Creek. They have the paved trail. So with this amendment, that would be considered a park?
Well, and again, we've said that anything that is a park space really is already encompassed. You know, you could have a trail in a park, basically. A trail system is
Correct.
essentially considered to be part of the definition of public park.
And again, so that would be considered a park, the Midas Creek Trail?
Yes.
Yes, no?
Yes.
Maybe?
Yeah.
And the reason why I ask is because Bullfrog has a 10-foot paved trail outside the front of theirs. So would that be considered a park as well then?
No, because that's part of the right-of-way. That's already involved with
That was all I wanted clarity on.
Okay,
Because
okay, I see
that's
that.
how I understand it, but I just want to make sure I was on the same page with
Yeah.
it. Okay.
Just because it's a trail doesn't necessarily mean it's a park. It's just that a trail can be within a park. Another thing that we are looking at, and I've recommended that this is good public policy to the city manager and the city council, is actually identifying open space on our zoning map. But that's a very comprehensive and heavy lift because it would require extensive noticing and more study and more review as far as the impacts. So that may be another step that we'll be looking at, try to communicate with the broader public of where are these publicly owned park and open spaces. And we probably would end up having a native open space and a park space, a space that's improved. But that's something we're still studying.
And then other question, so what is the true benefit of changing this definition, I guess?
Primarily, this is a way of having the city council, who is the body that is authorized with expending city funds, have more accountability over the construction and the costs that are associated with park development.
And maintenance.
Yeah.
The maintenance still. Question for you, and I don't know if it would be in this ordinance or if it can be just changed, but if a park is approved with a development, and it becomes, and we decide it's going to be a public park, and it has, just name an amenity, a restroom in it. Just, if the city wants to change that in the future, can they get rid of that restroom if they choose to? Or is there anything that protects that requirement? Especially as you look to future councils, costs get tight. Can the city choose to just start closing that stuff?
The way that the draft is written, the policy that was in the packet was implying that those types of amendments would still have like a public review process, but that would be under the purview of the city council essentially.
And that's not, the policy that you were looking at, we're really not making a recommendation on any of that piece, right?
Right.
But I would suggest that should totally be something that should be almost a public notice right now we're still a young city, we're still developing and growing. But I could imagine if you moved into a neighborhood that had a public park next to it, and then all of a sudden the city does a pivot move and switches and decides to remove that park. I think we should figure out a way to notify residents at a higher level as we look to the future, looking at, some of the parks that I've seen in other cities do over time. So, again, it doesn't have anything to do with this action, but I was more curious.
If the planning commission were to make a motion on this, I believe you could also offer an advisory recommendation on that policy to the city council or to the city administration.
Because I think
Yeah.
it's all a recommendation anyway, right? So you can do whatever you want, but that's just something that I think makes sense. So,
and although you didn't specifically ask this question, if a private park is part of a development, obviously that would still be subject to the public process and the planning commission review. We're just specifically talking about city-owned park space. Yeah, public parks.
perfect.
Yeah.
Mike, 4.8 1 reads that trails are included in the definition of public parks. Is that true of all trails? It sounded like earlier you said that they may not be part of a park. Did I just mishear you? Are
sure,
all
and-
trails part of
I think it's
parks?
clarity on what the definition of a trail is because, I mean, I think that's where I was asking the question too of, do we consider that 10-foot bike path a trail or do we consider Midas Creek a trail? And so I think that's maybe a little more what is
Trail
being
from
asked.
point A to point B, is it, by this definition, it's a public park?
Well.
Yeah, where is it
but
the definition of a trail?
It's also, you can have a trail within a right-of-way. So an urban trail, right, is often going to be in a public right-of-way, right? It's going to be encompassed. In fact, if you look at the definition of a street, it also references that trails can be considered under that umbrella of a street.
Yeah.
So the trails we're talking about would be along drainage channels, which would be like a native open space, or obviously in our foothills, you know, those park
So I guess the question
spaces.
is there clarity on what trails are defined as park?
We don't have a separate definition for a trail.
And I guess that's sort of just the question, and that's sort of what came to mind when I was thinking about this as well. And I don't know if Daryl's thinking the same way. Is there going to be some misunderstanding of which one's a trail, which one's not a trail considered in the park?
It almost seems like to me you're having more of a problem with parks not getting the funding for the trails components, where the roadway parts are covered because you have you have the trail reference inside the roadway, right? It's getting money set aside for the trail fixes in parks. That's the gap. That's what to me it sounds like.
And I understand, at least from that perspective. I don't want it to be misunderstood of what we consider the trails and the parks and right-of-ways, and I just want to make sure that there's nothing that's misunderstood
Yeah, I
in
think
that.
we're
I
saying the
guess.
same thing.
Yeah.
The clear thing is we just want to make sure that when somebody looks at where the city's designating a park or open space, that a trail can be within that space, right? It's an element that is part of a park system.
Sure.
Park. That's all it's trying to do, is just clarify. We've been operating that way already, right? We've been doing trail development in our publicly owned open space and park space. It's just to be clear that trails can be an amenity within our park system.
Right.
And
so-
we have urban trails that are within our right-of-way, and that's already addressed by other chapters of the city code, outside of Title 10.
And
I
that's
think
what
I
was-
get it, that you can't trump a public right-of-way with a trail. It can exist within it. But maybe the wording should say, may expressly acknowledge that trails are included in the definition of a public park.
And that would be fair, so, yeah.
I was just going to say exactly what you did, Daryl, that those things are not mutually exclusive. You can have a public right-of-way, that is also a trail, right? They don't have to be unique. And really, to Michael's point, what we're trying to accomplish here is just clear up some ambiguity. It doesn't really change the application of how we've been treating these. And as we've looked at that language, we've tried to capture those unintended consequences. And really the intent here, under the direction of the city council, was to just kind of clear up some of those ambiguities as to what falls under that definition of a public park.
And this is this is the amendment right here. It's not, it just says, you know, here's these different amenities that can be within a public park. And we're just very specifically saying a trail can be within a public park or other area or open space. And anyway, that's the only new word, is a comma and trail and another comma, so.
Sorry, I'm just laughing.
Great.
We talked about it for 15 minutes.
All right. I will open the public hearing at this time. Thank you, Michael. And just state your name.
My name is Dustin Catrier. Public parks should not be considered a permitted use and should be kept as conditional use for all zones, especially when it comes to open space trails. I want to have a voice because the city is not giving you much information. The reasoning that it will save money is not necessarily because of the cost of a conditional use permit, it's because they have not followed their own ordinances, and it will be costly to fix or abandon these projects that they've done without permits. How much money are they really saving when it is already policy to pretty much do the same things that they'd have to do for a conditional permit? The real reason they want it changed is because they have created trails and parks without getting conditional permits and are now trying to fix their mistakes, not by actually fixing them, but by just trying to circumvent the ordinance. Some of the trails they built cannot meet the standards of a conditional use permit. The city should be held to the same standards as its citizens. They should follow what they present to citizens. They should follow city ordinances. Instead of admitting that the city messed up and fixing the problem and apologizing to the citizens who they had an adverse effect on, they are now asking the Planning Commission and City Council to change the city ordinance to just trust them to follow their own policies and to be accountable to its citizens. It is extremely shady that the very week that the city had a lawsuit filed against them regarding their blatant disregard of this ordinance, they are now asking to change the ordinance. My opinions have been formed by the following quotes taken from emails obtained from a grandma request that I'd love to share with you. In an email from park staff to city manager in 2018, when asked about parks and trails permits, the answer was, "We have not, until September, taken anything to Planning Commission for review." In another email from the Trails Committee chair to me when I asked how come they didn't follow the map, similar to what would be found in the master plan that they're asking to follow, the map that I had obtained at one of these open houses, the response was, "The map you keep showing is a cartoon. The actual trail building plan was presented at the public house," which is where I got it. Then in an email from the Trails Committee chair to the city staff, they admitted that they didn't follow their own plan and changed it the day before. We have realigned Eric's for the last time this evening. We brought the trail down on the north side of the slope instead of the southeast. However, this alignment is close to the driveway of several property owners. Just in case we have more complaints, I feel this should be addressed by an asset to their properties as they can access the trails easier. Now they can have something in common with all those ritzy houses in Corner Canyon. Trails in their backyard, exclamation point. Eric's trail will be finished tomorrow. Is this really the group that you trust to represent the citizens' interests with no clear guidelines through conditional use ordinances? If you want full copies of these emails, I can share them with you so you know that I'm not lying as I've been alleged in the past. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Seeing no other comments, we'll close the public hearing at this time and look for the Planning Commission for additional discussion.
I'm okay with the word trail. I get your intent in putting in permitted to make it easier, but again, kind of going with what I was saying earlier is I do think Harriman has become what we wanted it to be because we get citizens' comments and get citizens' feedback and input. The reason I like conditional is because then it does give us time to talk about it and see what we're doing. No different than what we do with our own utility companies by requiring walls around them and to make the community beautiful. So I think your intention, and I would assume, was just to make it so it made sense to make it permitted. But I do think we should be looking at trails and all park amenities as we advance to the future to ensure that it's doing what we want it to do as a community. So I like more of that being a conditional use, to be honest, so that we can talk about those impacts on the neighborhood because, I mean, just looking at Black Ridge, right? Black Ridge originally was, and I know this because I used to work for the city back at the time, it was just an idea, and we came up with the idea to put a park there. And then I'll be honest, I don't think we thought about enough planning on that regional draw, which is a good amenity, I think, for the city. But I think if we would have thought through it a little bit more and did it more like a conditional use, I think we might have gotten a better solution sooner rather than having to come up with parking problems and, you know, the impacts we were seeing. And so I kind of like those being conditional just so that we can get the community more involved. I know conditional doesn't mean they can comment, doesn't mean, but no different than we saw with that the earliest conditional use, the first one, right? We learned that a retaining wall was impacting one of our trails. So I kind of like the idea of it being conditional, but that's kind of my only 2 cents on that. And then on the policy side, I do think we need to have something in the provision that once we make a park, it's kind of like my whole idea about once we make a subdivision, we shouldn't change it. We're committing to what it should be without public involvement. So that's kind of, and I don't know how to capture that for your policy, but those are my only two concerns.
Additional comments? I do see the positive of having it be a conditional use. I do see that. I understand the intent of it being permitted, but I do think it changes the process and allows the community to see and hear what's happening with the process of it staying conditional. And I think that is something that over the last couple of years, at least with city council and staff and everyone else, they've really tried to be more transparent. We are a young city still. We haven't even hit the 20-year mark, and so we're still growing fast. And so I do see the positive aspects of leaving it conditional or recommending that to city council. And then just for those present, the process would be a recommendation from this body to city council that would then address it themselves and make a decision on that. And so I do see the positive aspect of that, though.
And I should clarify, as a modification, you could certainly recommend a combination of amendments. You could have some that are permitted, some are conditional. You could amend the definition, not amend the definition. So just be clear, if you are to make a recommendation tonight, just consider those modifications that are options to you.
Will do. And honestly, I like giving even the city requirements. We've done that before on having conditions, and that's why I like it being a conditional use. So with that, I'm ready to make a motion unless anybody has an opinion.
Go ahead.
I want to force the conversation, sorry.
Maybe just, Michael sparked just kind of a thought in my mind. Would there be a difference between the residential areas and, say, the mixed-use areas?
Yeah, I don't think so, because I actually think that all those Cs should stay. When you look at what's on my screen, I apologize, I'm looking at what probably Chris is looking at, right?
Part of the reason I bring it up is I think I would like to encourage parks in mixed-use zones.
I don't think it's a discouragement. I think it's just saying we want it to come back and make it a conditional use versus a
Well,
permitted.
and I'm thinking of more the developer mind. If developers are going into an area and they say, oh, it might be harder to get this or that, but hey, if we put in a park, then.
So I get the permitted for that purpose, and I do understand it, but we had I think to the pump track, I don't know if you guys remember, there was the pump track that was going to go in, the Parks Department, I think, bought it, I don't remember, and they kind of came in after the fact and said, hey, we want to put this here, and we started asking questions about, holy cow, what about parking, what about this?
And there
what
was
about
no
that?
parking unless they were parking in front of people's houses.
There was no plan, and we got a little bit of money for equipment, I get that, but there is sustainment tail, and I think that's the purpose of adding trail in and things like that, is so that you can have that and sharing with the community.
And it found a better location.
And then it did, it really, I don't think it's been installed yet, but it found where it will go. And if you look at where it's going to go, there's a parking lot and there's amenities to mitigate those impacts of that. And so I get what you're trying to say is you should try and draw, but I don't think the conditional punishes. I think it just allows for the city to have to be accountable for what we're doing to parks as we advance, so that it's not just, go out and cut in a trail where that current Parks Department person thinks it should be. It's actually thinking about it more from a planning perspective or an engineering perspective and thinking through all of those impacts, just like we expect all of our commercial and private developers to do. I think I kind of agree. We should hold ourselves accountable because we are Harriman and we're better than that. We're not just reacting.
And over the last 6 months, we have seen several trails come through.
Yes, and there has been several trails. But I remember some of the trails, there's been questions on what does that mean? What does it do? And so I think, trailheads and things like that, it would help open up the honesty. perception.
Can I add just a little bit of context?
Yes,
as well?
absolutely.
So not to belabor this discussion, because I think you guys have hit all of it, but one of the things that the policy does address that the council wanted to account for was still having that public input by holding an open house, having it presented to the planning commission in a work meeting, and holding a public hearing at the city council level. One of the reasons for doing that is that with the conditional use tool, you're actually limited into what standards you review that under and which criteria you can apply to mitigate those impacts. Whereas when it's permitted and you have that feedback from residents, it's not simply clamor at that point, it's actually feedback that the council can impose, whereas you as a planning commission are restricted as to what conditions you can apply to a conditional use. And so the council actually looked at this and said, we don't have to get rid of that public feedback, but we're actually a little bit more enabled to enact those things that the public bring to our attention.
So is there a way we could bring the public more into the planning commission piece?
Could hold a public hearing at the planning commission level as well.
So that's what I would recommend, is if we went that route, I'm okay with it. Now, again, I like conditional uses because you can still get emails and hear what's going on and the concerns, and you're not dealing with public clamor. But you're still hearing about the potential.
We don't hold a public hearing on conditional uses.
And I'm not gonna
Very true.
name the instance, but I do also know that in the community meeting, there was a development that proposed a park with certain things like that and promised certain things, and then came back later and said, oh yeah, we can do that if the city pays for that. And so that's the one thing that I worry about a little bit with that process, because it seems like it became aware to the citizens that that was not the city saying, we don't want to do that for you. We can't afford to do that for you because there was something promised to you by someone other than us, and we can't do that. And so I guess the transparency is what protects us, though, and I just don't want to take that away.
So Chase, can the city not hold an open house if it's a conditional use, like beforehand?
So my advice is not to, because as a planning commission, when you review a conditional use, your review should be limited to the standards, the objective standards that are set forth in the ordinance.
And it is.
Right?
It has to be.
And you guys do a great job of
It has
that,
to be,
right?
yeah.
And so that's kind of the how do I say that? There's not a lot of value, as we look at that, to the open house process in our current conditional use review, because that kind of ends there. And the Trails Committee can make changes that they bring to you from that. But again, this is the city council saying, if we're holding the purse strings and we get all this feedback, we kind of have to itemize those and prioritize what we actually do to implement the feedback that we receive. And again, that's not the council's intent to eliminate that. They want to
They want to open it up more.
They open it up a little bit more, right?
So I would say for the park amenities, if we could incorporate it being conditional use with some type of public comment, period, for parks only, not every conditional use, but related to parks, because they are so impactful to people, right? I mean, a lot of people make decisions on parks or where not to live by parks and what the amenities and things are, that I would hate to. I like the way that we've migrated, where we have open forums and meetings with outside the planning commission and council. I think it's a good thing, but I also think it's not as official, just like Chris was pointing out with that other development where unofficially, not on public comment, commitments get made, whether that's by even a well-intended city staffer, right? They get made that aren't official record. And I think somehow we need to incorporate those.
Well, I think Chase made a good point that by keeping these all as conditional, you're actually restricting the amount of kind of leeway that we have and that the city has. Because if they have to come to the conditional use permit process, they're restricted. But if we move it to the permissible, that allows not just public comment, but also review by us.
Not if it's permitted, it won't
If
come
it's
to us.
permitted, we'll never see it.
That's
No,
what I'm
but
saying.
that's
though. You
what
can
he's saying,
include
is
that
they
in the
actually
pro-
are
as
going
part
to
of
do
the
that.
process. In your
That's part of the
If we ask
process.
for that.
Yeah, you can make your recommendation.
Because if it's
to the council.
technically just permitted, we won't ever see it.
Would never
Unless,
say.
We would
unless you
have
add
to
it to
change
the
the process.
policy.
We'd have to add a policy or change it.
But the policy can be,
Policy does already include in 1.1.2, be presented in a work meeting of the Harriman City Planning Commission.
So it'd be a work meeting, but not this
And again,
actual meeting.
You could make a
Right.
recommendation to alter
Right.
that policy provision.
And I think that we also need to include it in the mixed use part, not just mixed use too.
So the only concern I have is, because I know we voiced how best to get the public comment from the community, which I love. But the only thing that I worry about is sometimes the public comment is a wish list of things we can never provide, because there's already requirements of what can or cannot be done sometimes. And so if it's at the point where it's a master development agreement and things like that, saying as you build the parks, these are the requirements of what you have, it's totally different. But when we get to a standard PUD and things like that, I'm not sure how much it'll help us or hurt the community, other than the transparency of what we can do and show them during the process. I guess I wonder how best to do that. Because that is what we want to do, is provide for the public those things that they want. But at the same time, if in our ordinances and the process and everything else, we can't change anything, it doesn't really help much.
And agreed. It's a great point. And it comes down to what the council appropriates. Because even if, for example, the city is the applicant and we come and you impose certain conditions on a conditional use, that still has to go to the city for appropriation, right? If the conditions that you impose are so burdensome and cost prohibitive, it's just never going to get built, right? And so I think, again, council's intention is not to take away that feedback, but instead to say, we've got it all. What can we do within the budget that we actually have appropriated for this item?
So I guess
that's why I think we have two separate bodies, is so that you can look at the financial should be the financial and the planning should be the planning.
Right.
And we shouldn't, I mean, even though a lot of us are professionals inside, do this for careers in different capacities, we shouldn't be looking at it from the cost of the city. It should be for the community as a whole. And that may put a burden on the city to go find more funding, which puts a burden on the council members and to appropriate appropriately, right?
And maybe I've miscommunicated that, because I don't think that's the council's intention. I think they still want the planning input, and maybe you have a better idea of how to do that. And so I would encourage you to maybe come up with some ideas of how to recommend that planning commission.
I'm trying. That's why I like the conditional use piece, because it does force. It's a good checkpoint that you have to actually come do it. But I agree with you. It doesn't open up public comment. But also policies are difficult because they're a policy, right? It's not a rule or an actual
It's more changeable.
law. It's more changeable and flexible depending on what we want to do. So that's where I would prefer more written in the ordinance, and I don't know how to say it, but basically a conditional use like application where the city could take feedback and talk about those concerns with the appropriate parks or trail committees as the actual person doing the application, so that we can make sure, because I have seen where it has almost seemed like we've gone down the road, we've gotten the funding, and oh, by the way, we forgot to do the plan, the conditional use permit. And I don't think we would have let any of our residents do that, so I do think we should be consistent in some fashion.
And I think public comment, I mean, if they do have a community meeting, and bringing that to us with our packets or things like that versus having a public comment here may be a good way to still get all the different input about the ideas and what they'd like and what they're worried about and things like that, so we can still consider those. I hate having a public comment when they get up there and they can tell us all these concerns and we're tied because of zoning and general plan, and to where it's like, I'm glad we heard everything, we can't do anything. And that's the only thing I want to make sure that we sort of keep the frustration of that aspect out of it.
And that's why I wonder if conditional use does make the most sense, still have the policy where we notify it. And if it's a big enough issue, we can choose to take public comment on that one. So if it was, hey, we're doing a park in this location.
So I guess we're just unsure of the process. The idea and everything, and real easy in the language, change trails in there, but I guess it's the question of the best process to make sure that we can accomplish what's best for the city and the citizens. So I think that's what we're trying to figure out.
I think, and again, this is just a legislative item where you're making a recommendation to the city council. You can also, as part of your recommendation, let them know what your interests and concerns are and have them work through that, right? It's also part of within your purview.
Absolutely, thank you. Did I close the public hearing? I think I did, right? Close the public hearing? Yes.
You do now. You just said close.
Okay, I'll close the public hearing at this time in case I didn't. I think I did, but I wasn't sure. So additional comments from, I guess, the planning commission on this? I think the question is just the best process.
So how do you go ahead and phrase an updated recommendation?
So we had a couple, and this is mostly with, I think some of the MDAs and other things that came through, was the process was there was a community meeting, that then it came to us, and then it became a recommendation to them, and it was a different process.
In a meeting like this, or
Yes.
in the workroom?
Sometimes we'd say it in the work meeting prior, but not always.
I prefer it in this form.
I prefer it in here.
Yeah.
It makes us more accountable if it's in here.
It just makes it
It's just
transparent,
reality,
too.
right? It's official.
Yeah.
So that's why I think conditional use. So to answer you, Daryl, what I'm thinking is, what would be my recommendation to city council for approval?
I got one more question, though, because I'm not fully understanding how a permitted use versus a conditional use is going to make it to where we can provide a better product to the community. And it sounds like from staff, they have an opinion that it can. And I want to, if that's the case, I guess I just want clarity on why, because I'm still not seeing it.
So I wouldn't necessarily say that you can. In fact, I'd flip that on its head and say the inverse, that with a conditional use, you, as a planning commission, are restricted as to what you can do, right? You can't impose unreasonable conditions within the scope of a conditional use. So I guess that's what I was trying to get at. It's not that not that this is necessarily the better way, but doing it under a conditional use actually limits what you can do. So the feedback at these community meetings is kind of hollow, a little bit empty, because if it simply comes to this body for a conditional use review, you again are limited into what you can do, even if residents have good ideas and good recommendations about how to improve those trails or parks or whatever the system is that's being considered for conditional review.
Unless we treat it like the subdivision ordinance where they have to meet with the community and get some type of, it's not an approval, but some type of agreement, and then they come here more prepared for that discussion.
It's a better
That's the
product.
point.
It's a better product when it goes through that process.
If we're the applicant, we can make the change before it comes to you, we as staff, but you can't make that change.
Agreed.
Right.
And that's what I don't know that we would be looking at safety, health, welfare of the community, which is the purpose and primary driver of our positions here.
How it fits with the ordinances and
And how it
zoning and
fits
everything else.
with the zoning and things like that, which I think does lend the, hey, if somebody really likes mountain biking and they want a mountain bike jump behind their house, yes, of course they're going to be supportive of it if it's a trail, right? But if it doesn't fit with the overall planning of what's going on, I do think that's why it makes sense to have us be conditional. So, but that's just my thought. But I think we could go around and around. In reality, we're just making a recommendation for approval or not approval, and the council is the one that makes the decision. So
correct.
So we could go with a simple recommendation to deny.
My actually recommendation is that's one option, would be that we recommend for approval to add the word trail in, to make them all conditional use, and to adjust the policy to say that we don't need to worry about planning commission if we call it a conditional use, because it will come back to us in an official meeting. I think that we make it similar to the subdivision, which it does have some of that, where they have a public open house, they discuss the narratives with the community. And then if council wants to have another follow-up meeting after ours, then that's even an extra step. But to me, I think it meets the intent of everything we're trying to say. So those are my only two things. And the policy, the problem with the policy and what I still struggle with is It's just a policy. So it can be changed.
So, and I think with developers, this becomes very easy. It's just maintaining that as a city puts in trails and stuff. And I don't know what the current process when like Eric's Trail came in and stuff. Did it go to a community meeting first and then came here?
I think that's the issue.
Was that the process it was before? Or did it just come here first? Because I remember seeing those trails. I just don't know if it went to a community meeting first and then it came here.
I'm not sure of that exactly.
But Chris, if I remember the Eric's Trail,
I'm just saying the
if you
trails in
remember, it
general.
did come to us, but there wasn't, I'll say it wasn't a typical conditional use application. It was a napkin sketch on a wall, and we were excited for a trail, but it wasn't the same level that we would expect out of our commercial developers or our subdivisions. So that's what I'm trying to drive, is that we need to be more standardized.
Well, and there is some truth to with these trails that they typically don't have it 100% positively mapped out until they start going through the terrain, and then it changes slightly.
They've surveyed.
Yeah.
And there's always adjustments. I mean,
Just like
after,
everything,
this is
right?
essentially a preliminary approval. That's typically what the planning commission is giving. And then there's a technical review after you, like the building permit review, for example. There's always refinements of key issues there.
But like we saw with the pump track, it didn't come in as, it was a work meeting discussion, if I remember right. And actually, maybe we did
It
treat that
was
as a
presented
conditional.
in here,
Was it
yeah.
treated as a
Yeah, and you
conditional?
tabled it.
And
Yeah.
that one made sense to me because we started talking about big parking, and that's where I think our body does insert ourselves for big parks and trails. But
Again, just as Chase's, our city attorney has stated, the desire from the administration and the city council is not to eliminate the public process, the public input process.
Fair.
But more to move the decision-making process closer to the kind of the financing or the expenditure, right? Who's paying for it? Who knows what is the extent of what we have available to make the improvements? And that's the city council, right? They're the ones who authorize the expenditures.
I get the
So we're just trying to
authorization.
move that process closer together.
And that, I can see why that would be advantageous to the city, but I think that's why you have the check and balance of the two bodies, so. I'm ready to make a recommendation.
If you could make sure in your recommendation that they also add it to the MU zone.
Okay.
Yeah, the MU zone's not on at least this.
Okay.
Those ones missed.
It's actually on the 4.1 where it says NMU mixed use zones, but it doesn't have it on this.
It's in the MU2, as you can see, it's just.
Right, just not in the
If whoever's driving
Oh,
the
yeah.
slides can
So
slide
just
back,
let
just,
them-
I want to be as clear to staff since you're going to be presenting this to council. But I would like to recommend approval of item 4.1 with the addition of if you scroll back, the word trails, like we have that in the park and public definitions, and then now go forward for me. And then for the park and public, I would recommend that it is a conditional use on all of the locations, and I'll say MU and MU2, but I'm actually okay if it's conditional use across the whole thing, but that's just me. I don't see why it'd be a negative. So I'm okay with conditional uses all the way across. And then I think that we should adjust the policy to be similar to the subdivision policy, where it goes to a local neighborhood type meeting, then it comes to the conditional use portion of the planning commission. And then if council would like to still have another meeting, that's fine. But I do think it makes more sense to separate that, and if the council doesn't have enough funding, that should be a discussion they have to do and come back to address that. So that's more of just a recommendation of dialogue for the council when they're listening to this in the future. But I think we go with the conditional use.
Motion made by Adam,
Second.
second by Andrea. We'll call for a vote. Forrest,
Yes.
Jackson,
Yes.
Adam,
Yes?
Andrea,
Yes.
and Daryl.
Yes.
All right, that moves on to city council. We'll move on to item 4.2, which is a request for recommendation to amend the general plan for 13.66 acres from commercial to light industrial.
All right, so this is a general plan amendment for property up north here, well, south, in the south area of the city. Per standards, the applicant is required to submit both a general plan amendment and a zoning amendment consecutively, and the applicant has done that, and that following item will be that zoning amendment. So what the applicant is requesting is, well, here's the site of where of the general plan, and it consists, the general plan itself consists of just 2 of these 3 parcels. Currently, the general plan has these, the initial parcels here, parcel 1 and parcel 2 are primarily all, I guess, designated as industrial or light industrial. And the majority of parcel 3 and a little section of parcel 2 is the general plan has it designated as C2. What the applicant is requesting is taking that C2 section and redesignate that as a light industrial. And this general area here, the city's kind of earmarked this area already as manufacturing. The applicant is in the process, well, they are the owners of the Porter Rockwell development, and their intent is to expand that over to these other 3 parcels. And to provide that particular land use, they're asking for a land use, a general plan amendment to do so. All in all, it's 13.6 acres they're asking to redesignate. Here again, this is what they're proposing, just the section of parcel 3 and parcel 1 of these 3 parcels.
What's parcel 2 on that map?
Sorry?
The parcel 2 reference, is that M1 as well, or maybe I'm just confused? Are they all M1 in that reference?
Yeah, parcel 1.
Okay.
Yeah, parcel 1, parcel 2, parcel 3, sorry.
No worries.
Sorry, pretty purple.
As I mentioned, the request comes from an extension of the Rockwell Landing development. The area is currently zoned Ag 1. The applicant, again, is requesting a zone change as well. And that would be a zone change to M1 manufacturing. Looking over the criteria for approval, it does promote the public interest. We do get a lot of demand from developers and business owners about these types of spaces. It does conserve the property value. The area itself is primarily already M1. The property to the east of the development there is C2. They do have some similar land uses, but there are some provisions in our ordinance to mitigate any incompatible, impacts from incompatible uses. At this point, the staff does recommend a positive recommendation to the city council. So if you guys have any questions for me or for the applicant.
And just make sure I'm on the same page, you went through 4.2 and 4.3.
Sorry?
You touched on both 4.2 and 4.3, right?
Agenda items.
Agenda items.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll go through
I was just double checking.
Yeah, I'll go through 4.3 afterwards.
Can I ask one question? Just if you go back to that map right there on
This one?
if we were to go with the recommendation that staff's recommending, how wide would the commercial land, I know it's not part of their property, be from Redwood Road to this piece of property? Would we basically be seeing a negative?
Is that low corner?
Yeah, would we be seeing a negative detrimental effect of that commercial property in reality not being commercial?
Let's see if I can.
On the very corner of Porter Rockwell and Redwood? Yeah, how big is
This
that?
little, the triangle piece up there.
What I'm trying to say is how much of
deep
that
is that?
are we basically not, what are we doing to its detrimental effect for commercial? And again, we all know that
Fit a come-and-go gas station there.
I don't, so it's a pretty decent slope right there, and it's really close to 2 major intersections. So I'm just asking, are we, by doing this, would we be seeing a detrimental effect, probably almost along Redwood Road for the length of parcel 3 from a commercial perspective?
Oh, you mean in between parcel 3 and Redwood Road?
Yep.
Is that what you mean?
Yeah. So that's more what I'm trying to understand is
So the parcel to the east.
Correct.
the east.
Yeah.
On the north end of the parcel to the east.
Because if
What's the depth?
Does it allow it to be developable
developable
still?
commercial, because I would argue
Does it
it
damage?
doesn't.
Does it damage
I don't
that
know
piece
if
of
it does.
property?
Does it damage that whole area?
I want to say that has a pretty good slope on it.
So it
I mean,
does.
that's pretty wide. You look at Redwood Road, and Redwood Road is, what,
Okay.
120 foot
Yeah.
right away? So you've got at
Oh,
least
it is pretty wide.
130, 140 feet deep.
Except for there's about a 20-foot cut. You're at that parcel is about 20 feet above the intersection. So that's all I'm trying to say is it may make it so that, and again, remember, I'm not a firm believer that we're going to get every commercial red space that we think. I've said that a bunch of times. So I'm
But
not
really,
saying I want it to
the
be a church.
property line has more impact on shaping the development of the property adjacent to Redwood Road, not the transition from C2 to M1. It's the property line that has that effect.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, Sheldon. If the applicants, or do you have more information? Sorry.
I don't.
Okay. Then I'll let you have a seat, and if the applicant's here and wants to share any additional information.
Good evening, my name is Braden Rindlisbacher with Scenic Development, and I don't really have anything further to add to what Sheldon said, but I'm happy to answer any questions if there's any.
Thank you. Any questions for the applicant right now?
Why drive towards this versus the C zone? What's the
What's the drive for M1 versus C2? So I'm sure you're all familiar with the Rockwell Landing Business Park. We've developed that, and we feel it's done well for us and for the city to serve the city on different needs. And with the access coming off of Rockwell Park Lane there, we feel that it makes sense to continue with the M1 zone. And on the westward portion of Parcel 3, there is a power corridor that kind of goes through there that makes portions of that unbuildable. And so we felt that, I mean, the eastern portion is more buildable, and so that's the main purpose for our proposal.
Okay.
Thank you. Any questions? You can have a seat. I will open the public hearing at this time. So if anyone wants to come up, just state your name. You were ready.
I was. I appreciate the opportunity I have to speak to you tonight. My name is Gary McDougall, 11723 South Highland Oak Circle. I am the owner of the C2 parcel. Maybe you could bring that back up but I own the C2 parcel to the east, which is rather narrow out against Redwood Road. I bought this property when I was under 50. I'm now 70. Things have changed. The 1 acre zoning that was desired and demanded probably doesn't work anymore. Kim is asking you for M1 zone, which probably makes some sense. When we did C2 zone, that was prior to commercial, or prior to COVID, but now commercial's not in the kind of demand that C2 is. And I guess I just bring up the fact that if you want the corner on Redwood and Porter to be commercial, that we're a bit narrow to just be that and really do much with that. My main concern, though, in coming tonight, in the past we were surprised at the development to the west of us, which Kim did up there. You can see the cul-de-sac on their buildings, but it didn't anticipate any cross-access or connectivity across the corner. I'd like to urge you to pay attention next time you drive down Porter Rockwell or Redwood and look at that corner and say to yourself, if there was buildings all over that corner, would you not expect to get from one part of from the buildings to the east to the buildings to the west? As it stands now, they're going to have the same south address, but they're going to be cut off. The commercial will be cut off from the M1. There is a canal there. There's no anticipated roads. We asked him to hook or connect where that cul-de-sac ends on Porter Park and years ago, and we met with the city, and we came out and met with Jordan Valley, who has an aqueduct through there, and they said they were fine with us putting a road over that aqueduct, and we were encouraged to preserve that so that we could connect all the way through to Porter Rockwell. When the signal went in on Redwood, if you're acquainted with the area, we put in a gate because people were constantly driving up in there to try and get to Kim's property. The contractors had come in there because they could see the buildings, they were close. People thought they could cut the corner, so there was no access, so we put in the gate. Eventually, we will open that gate when we develop, and I think the public will anticipate that they can get through there. When there's accidents on Redwood Road, and I don't know if you've seen that, but the traffic builds up and there's accidents, there's another access even further south, and people go in on that and try and cross the corner. So they drive that dirt road in across our property, realize they can't get out, come back to Redwood, go down the intersection, go back up. But I think if all of Kim's property is M1 with no C2, C2 may not be all that feasible. Am I limited to time there?
You're limited on time, but I'll give you a little bit longer if you just want to wrap it up.
Anyway, we've worked on accesses with Jordan Valley. We have that. I would recommend you give careful thought to connectivity across that corner. There's emergency access possibilities needed. There's fire access possibilities. When the traffic bunches and there's accidents on Porter or Redwood, you may need access through there. And I'd try to, when you go out there, try to visualize what that commercial corners look like with buildings. And if you can't get from one building to the next because they're cut off, I feel like the entire corner should probably be zoned M1 or commercial, at least with some feasibility, if that's what you want on that corner, or we should abandon the commercial because our commercial is pretty narrow. Anyway, cross access is really important. I think we need, you don't do subdivisions that just stop and go back out, and somehow we need to do that. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your comments. All right, at this time, I'll close the public hearing and look at the Planning Commission for additional discussion.
If the corners on Redwood and Porter Rockwell were to develop, does light industrial allow for convenience stores, something like that?
I have to double check the land use table, but I believe it does. Yeah.
Do we know what Bluffdale's doing in this region on the other side of Redwood Road?
Yeah, they have some.
I know they got some housing, but they also have some light industrial.
They have some light
as well.
industrial farther up.
Further up.
Further up a little bit.
But not at this corner.
I was more just curious what their corner is, and if, again, I know
Yeah, it'd
we
be
love
great,
commercial,
great location for a gas station.
but I think Bluffdale will get it on their side first because it's the easier side of the intersection. But
I know for me, when you look at the general plan, and I don't know if there's a way to zoom out here, but really this is kind of an entrance to the city. It's the gateway to the city.
Very much so.
And so I think commercial is why we've had that in the plan originally.
I agree with you.
So
to me, if we're gonna go with it, and that's why, since staff recommended it, I think we should make sure the whole corner should be one or the other is what I'm trying to say.
Right. Well, and I
so
think
it's compatible uses that fit each other.
Right, but I think the best use of the space is as a gateway. It would be commercial. And that's why we had that in the original plan.
Yeah. I think it will have a lot of use as well.
To do what the applicant has planned, could either zone work for them?
They would need light industrial
They need
for what
light
they're
industrial
doing.
to put those kind of buildings on it. Commercial, it doesn't fit the commercial. But, I do like light industrial because it's not a church sitting up on top of that corner.
I think
For a
light
school.
industrial has proven to be very productive out here.
Charter school. I
It's
think it
done
should
really
be-
well. So
I think it should be a charter school right there. I'm kidding.
Can staff go back one slide to where it showed a little bit more of the southern
Area.
properties? Yeah.
So I think the commercial up against Redwood makes a lot of sense with how it's designed. And I don't think light industrial behind it on the east side. I think it's okay, or west side.
Well,
If you go back, I'm okay with it. If you go back forward, I guess, I'm okay with it being the red to purple line, adjusting a teeny bit, but I don't want to get rid of the whole area.
Yeah, I think adjusting it a teeny bit, but it makes sense to keep the industrial next to the future freeway.
Yep, I agree.
So having the industrial next to the freeway makes sense, but then.
Is that what these yellow lines are, to give you an idea where that is on the other side? I don't know. Okay.
Commissioners, just following up on your question, a convenience store is a conditional use in that zone, as well as a gasoline service station in the M1 zone.
It could be either for that purpose, at least.
But if they're wanting to put in.
Yeah, it's flex space, right? And that's what the market wants. And the challenge with flex spaces is that oftentimes it's a warehouse distribution service,
Correct.
wholesale, that is going into those buildings.
Or dance studio.
So, and that doesn't work in the C2 zone, right? We don't allow storage in the C2 zone, and we don't allow wholesale in the C2 zone. So.
Well, I mean, I think we focus on parcel 1, 2, and 3, and then if they bring that back, I think it becomes a different application for the other area. So,
I don't know.
Look for a motion, or is there more discussion to be made here?
Jackson, I think, has already. It sounds like he has a motion.
This is recommendation to city council.
Let's see, I'm
Maybe
trying
he's
to think
not.
of the
I
best
thought
way to
you, I
phrase
thought
it.
you were ready, so.
Yeah, but I think, well, my recommendation is to keep it commercial.
So to deny?
Yeah, I think it would make a recommendation to deny.
And I lean towards, I think it's okay for light industrial in this area.
Well, and I'm still concerned with the depth between parcel 3 and Redwood Road on that north end.
So I would be, and this is what I was trying to say, is you know how parcel 2 comes down and you can see that there's kind of like a line where it touches right there? If maybe that, if you drew a straight line down, if everything left of that stayed light industrial and everything right of that stayed commercial, then to me, that's kind of where
That would satisfy me.
that's kind of where I'm.
Yeah.
And I disagree. I think light industrial's become the more popular commercial entity, if you want to call it that. And it's becoming more widely
There's
used.
lots of space for that going south. But right against Redwood Road, if we keep the commercial, then we have, that's kind of the plan that helps us.
I
with
think it
that
would give
gateway
us
to
a
the city.
bigger swath of commercial, appease a little bit of, I agree with you, Chris, but also light industrial is where it's going in everywhere. So we need to look at the long game and realize that markets change, right?
Well, I look at light
The
industrial
next
can be adapted more easily than sometimes commercial can even.
But I don't think, I agree with you, but I don't think
Well, you
a
get-
bunch of dance studios is going to help the city.
I was gonna say, you get a bunch of dance studios.
So and that's what I've seen. I get that there's flex space and there's a lot of good positive on this side, but the dance studios, although needed, aren't where we want to put them right on the corner as you come into Harriman. So
Yeah, we
that's
don't
where I
want
lean
that
on
as our
commercial.
gateway.
So like I said, that's kind of why I would lean on basically saying, and this is more since we have to either say recommend approval or denial, right? Is if the line went down, like I said, like whoever was doing their mouse, they basically showed it where if from there straight due south was the dividing line between commercial and residential. So again, I'm okay with parcel 2, I'm okay with parcel 1. It's the parcel 3 that
Yeah, we need to keep.
we need to keep
commercial.
more commercial there, so.
So are you saying that you want commercial on the east side of parcel 3?
But don't we have the dilemma?
But you're basically dividing their parcel up.
Yeah, we're
with
dividing
two
their
different
property
zones.
between two different zones.
And
which
you're
makes neither of them
requiring
viable.
commercial to be.
It's already divided.
I understand, but you're requiring the commercial, if the goal is to have commercial on Redwood,
Right.
parcel 3 is not on Redwood.
Except for.
It's not.
But.
It's still not.
We gotta be realistic. All Redwood will be access controlled and all Porter Rockwell will be access controlled.
That's
Yeah.
right. But you're not on Redwood then. Your access is from Porter Rockwell.
Correct.
Right? So they're gonna have to go through light industrial, which is there now, to get to commercial, and then you're just gonna have backs of buildings on
Now,
Redwood.
The next piece down, and part of the reason I was thinking of the larger picture is the next piece down is mixed use.
Sure.
So we're gonna get probably some, a whole lot of apartments coming in there as well.
Apartments and some commercial, right?
Apartments and commercial. And if we want the mixed use to be viable as mixed use, I think it needs to be adjacent to the commercial.
Agreed. But I just worry that we're getting rid of the too much commercial. Again,
I mean, I think
if we want to
having
go
commercial is valuable, but if it's to say that there's not enough, I mean, there's plenty of room on Redwood for commercial. These commercial lots aren't huge lots
not with that drainage going through it.
through parcel 3.
Through parcel 3. I'm looking at more next to it. If we allow commercial to go away in parcel 3, then we might as well, and you guys can see what I'm showing, so I don't know how to articulate that, but you might as well say then that all of that should be mixed use, that whole corner. So if you were to go to the furthest south parcel line, it's one or the other. To me, it can't, you either have to keep more commercial that's consistent, and I get that it's property lines, or you might as well go all mixed use on that corner. To me, it's one or the other, because it's not viable because you have a large drainage through there. It's huge, and if I remember right, when they wanted to do houses there, years and years ago, before we put commercial on there, it was, that was one of their amenities and selling factors about it being a residential area. So that's gonna be its own challenge to bear.
It seems to me like the commission may need additional information before you make a decision. The applicant said he'd be happy to maybe answer any of your questions you might have for him again tonight. I don't know which way you're leaning in voting on this item, but just bear in mind the applicant would be happy to answer some of your questions, or if you do decide to table, just be specific, giving direction to staff what information you would like for this to come back to you for further consideration.
So Mike, can you take your cursor and put it right at the bottom of parcel 3?
We're Destiny.
Whoever, Destiny, can you put the cursor right at the bottom of parcel 3 on the south end? What I'm saying is, if you go a line all the way over to Redwood, basically, if we're going to turn parcel 3 into M1, I don't understand the purpose of anything north of where Destiny's drawing her cursor to be commercial.
Why? Do you not think it's deep enough?
I don't think it's accessible.
Accessibility is the problem.
Because you're gonna have to cross that whole corner to get there. So you either have to come up from Porter Rockwell up a 20-foot embankment to get to it. There's a oodle amount of utilities in this area because nobody ever thought it would develop for a very, very long time, right? So there's tons of utilities. There's a gigantic drainage there. So what I'm saying is that area, if we were gonna do parcel 3 in its entirety as M1, we might as well do from basically that whole eastern line all the way to Redwood Road. Or keep the commercial for the gateway preservation that you're talking about. But doing it piecemeal, to me, we're leaning on it will end up not a good product in either capacity because it's too small, because of all those features.
Well, I disagree. I don't think it's too small. I mean, you're talking 1,500 feet road access. You could definitely have an access in that span for commercial. I mean, that right there is a gateway. I mean, gateway elements do not have to be large to make a big impact. And that is more than deep enough to have a nice gateway kind of element for commercial. Even with that drainage line, you know, where it crosses Redwood and kind of comes across, that lot right there alone is a huge lot.
Except for it's only right in, right out.
What's that?
It will only be a right in, right out.
I think we're gonna have to be further away from the intersection.
Yeah, it'll be further away, and you'd have to cross that drainage with some kind of culvert or
Do
whatever.
we know, it's a state road, do we know if it's an NA line or an LA line?
Those are, they're not no access, they're not a
Limited
freeway,
access.
so, yeah.
So
Just keep in mind that I've heard like the access off Porter Rockwell, there won't be any access off Porter Rockwell, there's too much grade. There is a road that comes off of Rockwell Park Lane that's actually a capital facility road on the master plan that runs down along the canal and will come through this property and goes down and ties in through Mr. McDougall's property.
Can you draw that on that screen?
What's that?
Can you draw that so we can see it?
But
Just a
it
rough?
comes south off that cul-de-sac and then turns east.
Right, just
Kind of
turns
comes
east and goes
down
up.
We're not seeing it.
and.
You can see it on those
Yeah,
screens.
I can see it on this
the big
screen,
screen.
somewhere.
This permanent marker didn't work.
Red mark. It's something like that. But
So it is gonna go
kind of
through
runs
that.
down through that way. There's utilities stubbed. It has some challenges because of the power corridor and the power poles that are there and the utilities that you've mentioned underneath. So it runs along that way. So that's where parcels 2 and 3 will get access. Parcel 1 is planned to be, or no, part of parcel 2 is planned to be a park and ride with UTA and UDOT and us. And so, yeah, so anything on this commercial piece you're talking about would have to be accessed off of Redwood. And that drainage was recently mapped as a FEMA floodplain, so any work in there would have to go through the FEMA process.
So with that, with what all of Blake said, then in my opinion, we might as well go M1 all the way to Redwood Road. Straight, to be honest.
Well, would it be M1, everything north of the drainage?
I'm okay with that. But I'm saying that corner is really tied to parcel 3. That true corner, because of the grade elevation, because of what Blake just said, that the only way you'd be able to access it is to do a right in on the, what would that be, eastbound traffic on Porter Rockwell,
Much
and a
further
right
is it?
out onto Redwood. That's all UDOT would ever allow us to do.
Well, Blaine just said we're not going to get access off Porter Rockwell. Rockwell Park, will that ever extend south and turn east?
Well, that's what it's showing on here a little bit.
I think he's showing a new road.
Yeah, he's showing
It's a new road. It's stubbed. If you go down and look, there's a stub that goes in before you get across the canal. It stubs and goes to the south and east.
It kind of divides parcel 2 in half.
Because the canal's a divider, we've got one road that services the existing buildings above the canal, and there'll be a new road that parallels Rockwell Park Cove that goes along this property.
Access off of Redwood will be problematic. I mean, UDOT's not going to let you penetrate too many times. They're going to want one
We have space.
major penetration.
We'll be lucky to get one between this and that new stoplight they just put in at the Bluffdales project.
There's an access plan put together that I've seen a couple of years ago, and UDOT's anticipating some accesses here for business-type uses.
Right,
But
right in, right
you're
out.
correct. It's going to be limited, and there's spacing requirements, and they'll have to share accesses if there's multiple businesses, is what you typically see with UDOT's approval.
And all I'm saying, honestly, I don't know that I'm kind of stuck between which is the right use. But I think anything north of that red line that Blake drew between it and Porter Rockwell and Redwood Road, to me should be a compatible use. Where right now the commercial's big enough that it is a compatible use. And if we carve that off, I honestly think we might as well carve off more, because you get to the point where it would be better just to put a big, nice monument sign itself in on that corner, because I don't think you'll get the commercial you're talking on that true corner as an entrance.
Commercial comes in all sizes. You're limiting it to just a large commercial center. I mean,
But let's not get too off track. We're really looking at these parcels.
right.
Agreed.
We're making a recommendation for these parcels.
Totally agree.
And so that's where we need to focus. It is entirely possible this will come back and be zoned differently to meet the same requirements of what these ones are beside it. So the question is, do we leave it commercial or do we?
And Chris, the only reason I keep
Change it.
bringing that in there is because I think we should make that from more of a goal for both areas. So that may sway one direction or the other.
And I don't disagree that possibly will be the outcome of it, because it seems like that's a very popular build right now, and it's very adaptable, which I do like in this area. And so,
Which I'll come back to, I think is great against the freeway, but I think it's such a prime location, especially as Porter Rockwell goes across the road and becomes a major road into our city. Well, because you'll come off 146 and up Porter Rockwell into Harriman. Once the bridge is built, that's going to become a major thoroughfare.
It will.
It will.
And this is the gateway to our city.
I mean, we have to be realistic. I drive it every day. That left turn from Redwood up to
That's a
Harriman
mess.
is.
Oh, the left turn is a mess.
Yeah,
but-
exactly.
Well, it's
but once
Redwood's
once the
already
bridge is in
packed.
place, this road's going to get very busy.
It
Yes.
will be.
So I'm still going back to Adam's notion of dropping a line due south off of that southeast tip of parcel 2. Can we ask the applicant, if you don't mind, a question? If we were to drop that line south, what does that do to your proposed
Which
work?
area? South of?
Right, from the cursor straight south.
So on the west side of that line, I have a concept that's not on here I could bring up and show you.
That'd be great, if you want to bring it up.
I think will be helpful. This right here is the parcel 2. And we've been working with staff to designate this parking ride
Yeah.
that you guys can utilize. Rockwell Park Lane, that would come in, and then this road comes through and stubs in. Because this, I mean, you got your, this slope here, it's 20 foot, some odd hill, and then this western portion, this building is right up against the power. That line right here, I mean, I'm not gonna be able to do too much.
You'd be losing one of your buildings.
2 of them.
You'd be losing this whole area here, yeah.
Yeah.
It would limit us pretty much on what, not as usable for.
You'd have to go to commercial use instead of what you're proposing, correctly?
Yeah, we've got plenty of that over in the county.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions or?
No, I'm good.
Thank you.
Okay.
No, not right now. Thank you, though.
Again, I
think I'm,
again, the only reason I keep bringing it together is I don't know which way I honestly want to go. I'm just saying, whatever we do, I think is starting that chain, and I just wanted to have that healthy
starting the chain
dialogue
both
there.
directions,
Yeah.
down
And so-
Redwood, the gateway into the city. I think this is a,
So part of me goes, I hear your gateway, but I actually think it's not the pretty gateway. The Mountain View is going to be the gateway. It's kind of what my brain leans towards. So,
well, between here and 134th, this is the 2 gateways to the city.
And I understand that, I just don't foresee this changing, that its use is probably the most productive use with what it is right now.
Well, right now, but I think as
Yeah.
the city grows south, there's going to be a lot more housing south. I mean, we saw
Yeah,
that proposal for 1,000 houses coming.
And I agree with Jackson. That's where we got to be careful, is because right now we can't envision it, but we have to be
There's growth coming.
forward-thinking.
so you know, with you guys saying that, I actually think it's better commercial. Because I'm going to say why.
I'm leaning towards, it's a longer term issue. So I think it in some ways, it just kind of.
So when we look at, and I know this because my wife just experienced this, there's a school where when Porter Rockwell goes across as a bridge, there's a school over there there's Jordan School District's over there. It's in Bluffdale. The closest food convenience store to go get like real groceries was to drive all the way to Peterson's in that area. There is
All the way down to Riverton?
all the way down to Riverton. There is no, all the Bluffdale homes over there, there is nothing unless you go into Draper or Riverton for groceries or our Lee's Marketplace. So I kind of wonder if this might become a better commercial.
This will be a better commercial, and Bluffdale stays so sparse because they don't have the rooftops to attract anything.
Correct, and so
I
kind of lean on that we
as we
keep.
start growing
This
south.
would also be the only commercial area here because there's light industrial on the other side, that's all they have. And so.
So I'm thinking it needs to stay commercial,
I think it needs
honestly.
to stay commercial.
Are you ready for a motion?
I'm ready for a motion.
For recommendation? I think we may want to ask that there's some further, I guess, make sure that as they approach the city council, they talk about the reasoning of why we came to this a little bit, though.
And again, I would be okay, and this is more for staff. I think I would be okay if the commercial line squoze in a little bit to maybe that parcel 2 connection. I was just trying to say for some flexibility to see if they can get one of their buildings done.
Maybe there's a squiggle in the line there, but yeah,
yes.
I think we need to keep the commercial there essentially.
So, but overall, I think some commercial.
You know, maybe, Adam, even if you were to cut a line that's parallel with Redwood Road instead of due south, just back it off a couple hundred feet from the road.
So it kept a nice, usable piece of commercial. again, that's kind of what I'm saying. If the line adjusts a little bit in from the A to like the C.
So are you
okay.
thinking like this, though, where it keeps parallel to it, so it almost meets here? Where it's like this?
I think you parallel it like what Daryl's saying off Redwood, and it kind of goes maybe like through.
But if you're saying it
Something
goes
like
to here,
something like
then it would be
Destiny's
like
showing, or
that.
maybe over a little bit more on the left side. But I think a little bit of flexibility I get, but
I
overall
think
we
when
need a
tied in
nice
with the mixed-
area of commercial
When
there.
tied in with the mixed use, this has some great opportunities here.
So
That is a busy area.
Yeah.
So I think I'm ready for a motion, and does staff understand what we're trying to say to articulate that to council?
See when you make the motion.
Hey, clear as mud, clear as
Do
mud.
you want me to try, or are you
Yeah,
gonna?
you go ahead. I've kind of done a lot of those tonight.
Let's see, do we have a list of the existing recommendations already? Let's see, I think it was, the existing recommendation was just to switch that partial fit. So I'm gonna say we make a recommendation to deny change to light industrial with the recommendation to make the line between the two workable, but still keep as much of the C2 as possible in that area.
Wouldn't that be a
just
recommendation?
denial.
That actually would
Recommendation,
be
yeah.
more of a recommendation of approval.
You're modifying.
You're modifying the approval.
Okay, so
Modifying
modifying the
request.
approval. That's probably, here,
want
maybe you can
restart?
phrase it, maybe you can phrase it.
Okay. So I would like to
Scratch that last
scratch the
motion.
last
Scratch the
one.
last motion.
And this is for 4.2, correct?
Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
I would like to recommend approval of item 4.2 with staff's recommendations and an adjustment to the line. And Destiny, I need you to go to the map so I can try and say what I'm going to say. To adjust the proposal of being the entire parcel 3 as light industrial and adjust a reasonable amount of commercial inside parcel 3. And I'm going to see, can I actually draw?
Look at you.
Something like that. That big blue line
To parallel
to
Redwood.
parallel Redwood Road.
There we go. Follow that blue line.
So something like that. So we're allowing a little bit of mixed use, but not all of mixed use on parcel 3.
With the attempt to preserve the commercial.
Yeah, to preserve the commercial. So,
Motion made by Adam as a recommendation to city council,
I'll second.
second by Jackson. We'll call for a vote. Forrest?
No.
Jackson?
Yes.
Adam?
yes.
Andrea?
Yes.
And Daryl?
Yes.
So that votes as a yes with a 4-1. And we'll move on to item 4.3, which is also on for public hearing.
Let's see if I can get rid of these marks. Okay. All right, so this is the zoning portion to the general plan amendment we just looked at. Let's quickly go through this. So the applicant's looking to rezone these 3 parcels here from A1 agriculture to M1 manufacturing. Again, as the general plan has designated this area, a portion of parcel 3 and parcel 2 are zoned M1 already, so that would be consistent with the general plan. Just the issue here we have is that the remaining parcel of parcel 3 and that little section of parcel 2 is zone C2 commercial. So I guess your recommendation would be, I guess, that the applicant is requesting a rezone to M1 manufacturing. As the applicant did propose it, I guess as the applicant has requested, the staff has recommended approval for that rezone. Let's get to the chase, so.
This is almost the exact same motion in reality,
Yeah, it's the
right?
same motion.
So,
So it just comes down to 1, 2, yes.
but
and
this
then-
has a public hearing, right?
Yeah, they both do, yeah.
Yes.
But we actually
Yeah.
need to hold that one.
And just to
Yep, we
quickly
do.
answer Daryl's question, this is from the last time, but the narrowest portion there on that C2 area over here is 200 feet, but just in hindsight.
That's not small.
Any questions for me or? for the applicant.
I don't think so. Thank you, Sheldon. And so if the applicant wants to come up and has any additional information.
I don't have any additional info to add. I think it's been discussed, so. I guess other than, I mean, that 200 feet there, I think is, in my opinion, would be operable for commercial. That corner alone, up to the parcel 3 property line on the west there. Because, I mean, you are right, you're not gonna get a full intersection right there because you've got Porter Rockwell Boulevard. That full intersection is gonna have to come further south. I think it's Mortimer Boulevard is that other intersection further south, so it'd have to be between those two. But in our opinion, as developers, what we're proposing would be in conformity and beneficial to the city, so. Any
Thank you.
questions?
Any questions? Thank you. I'll open the public hearing at this time.
My name is Chase Hudson. I'm with Park West Real Estate Partners. We are the group that has this site under contract with Kim and Braden. That was our site plan that Braden showed to you. Just a couple things I wanted to point out. Braden mentioned the power lines and the existing easement that is there on the site. It really makes the east side of that parcel the most valuable piece for contemplating manufacturing or light industrial. Without having really the entirety of that, it makes a lot of, you know, what us or any prospective buyer or developer for this would deem as feasible. We mentioned the connectivity of the road and wanted to make that connectivity as feasible as possible for any existing commercial that would be coming onto the commercial zone piece there on the east of the site. And then you mentioned dance studios, and I totally get that. What we were contemplating here is a little bit more of a larger scale warehousing distribution. So we'd be targeting more Amazon type tenants to come into these buildings and really drive the economic value for this area and help to hopefully add value to this part of town. So nothing else, and thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. We'll close the public hearing at this time and turn to the Planning Commission for additional discussion or motion to be made.
I think it's the same.
Kind of the same. You know what, if we have 200 feet.
I would say even if it was even over here,
Well,
as long as it's a reasonable amount.
That's what I was getting at. Let's push your blue line east to maybe accommodate the applicant's buildings and yet preserve some commercial.
Jackson, you can actually draw on the one next to you if you want to.
Let's see, where do I draw here?
There's only 2 screens. There's that one and that one.
Oh, only these screens can draw?
Yeah. So if you,
Oh, there we go.
if you push drawing tools at the top, you can draw what you want.
I was gonna follow more of this line here.
Yeah.
The triangle gets a little tough there, down at the bottom. And then we come off of parcel 2.
I still look at it as two different landowners too, which makes it very tricky. Yeah. I almost look at it from, it has to be one or the other, but.
Well, part of what my hope is in saying, passing what we passed in the previous resolution, and hopefully the same with this one, have some further discussion as to how, what the commercial is and how the other owners come together.
And maybe that's the follow-on discussion with that bringing both properties together and coming up with an overall solution, because I think that's the issue.
It may be expanding into a bigger warehouse and adding that property into it, who knows?
Because I think we all need some more Amazon. Everybody's buying Amazon now. But if it was over here, that's the spot by the freeway that seems great for warehouse.
Be right between the freeway.
Yeah.
It'd be right there by the freeway with great access, but then our gateway's still preserved.
Yeah, and I get, I just was noticing, like, that's the crazy power line stuff. So, I mean, this property does have a lot of challenges. So that's why I'm trying to, I guess, I mean, obviously all we're doing is recommending to council on either of these issues. And so to me, I think where the goal is to articulate, we should still get a reasonable amount of commercial along Redwood. And it may mean that not all parcel 3 should be commercial. So wherever that line becomes, I think is more of the discussion, and maybe bringing that to council would be a good.
Does that help out a little bit?
Was that helpful for the staff to be able to articulate? So with that, I would like to make a recommendation to approve item 4.3 with the adjustment to have the M1 around the green and blue line on this map that Jackson and I wrote, and commercial for a reasonable amount paralleling Redwood Road.
Motion made by Adam,
I'll second.
second by Jackson. We'll call for a vote. Daryl?
Yes.
Andrea?
Yes.
Adam?
Yes.
Jackson?
Yes.
Forrest?
No.
All right, so that recommendation goes on to the city council with a 4-1 vote. We'll look at item 5, any additional comments from the planning commission?
I have one. I always want to sit at this desk.
I think they all draw, actually.
No, it's just 2.
I couldn't get
It's
mine
just
to
2.
Yeah,
It's
it's
just these 2.
The small framed
So
ones.
I always want to sit
Oh.
one that I can draw on. I'm just kidding.
And I'm not sure we should have shown them how to do that.
Oh, I want to draw it.
So, all right. No other comments. Future meetings, Wednesday, April 27th, city council meeting. Thursday, May 5th, planning commission meeting. And Wednesday, May 11th, city council meeting. Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
I think the good thing about the 4-1 on that
funny.
vote is it'll.
What do you think?
You just
That is cool. It's really cool.
Yeah, I wish, I think I
Well,
remember
it's
them
weird,
saying
though,
that
'cause,
once,
like-
but I don't think we ever used it.
So Adam just forced them to sell some of their.
We're like voting to
No, so that's the
approve.
thing,
but
is every
we
other
appreciate your
property
comments.
rights, but it still means that they just have to come up with
Like
a
a no
solution that's
vote is like,
commercial.
it almost sounds like I didn't want.